Hello, hello. Welcome back to Whose Views. This is Chit Chat. And here I am, joined by BEDWYR. Hello there. Woo! You're right then?
I'm very well. How are you?
Oh, do you know what? Getting through. Listen, thank you for coming on to Chit Chat.
Oh, thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Yeah. So what this is about, Who Views, if you haven't seen this before, is this is the part of our channel where I get to meet with other fans and just shoot the breeze with them for a little while and talk to them about them and their interest in Doctor Who, etc., etc. And yeah, so BEDWYR, where did you discover the Doctor and how did you get into it?
So for me, it was the 1992 repeat season on BBC Two, I think it was.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember the Sea Devils coming out of the water, and that image just stuck with me and just lit a light. And I think the rest of that season we had Battlefield. I watched on a black and white television, so I had no idea for years that the story was blue.
That must have been a shock then.
Yeah. What else? I think we had another repeat of Genesis, which was just so dark and gritty and atmospheric. And from there, it was. I think I had my first VHS around the Christmas of '93.
What was that?
Resurrection of the Daleks.
Oh, okay.
So, you sit down and watch it, and the Daleks explode through this door, and so wow. And from that point, it was right. Well, I have to get every VHS now because I need to see all of the show because I was hooked. I was into it.
So that was what you got. Resurrection in what year?
I think it must have been 93.
1993. So really, in a sense, we're sort of halfway through the VHS collection. So it must have been a nightmare when you were going back to go, look at all these, Mom.
Yeah. I mean, you look back on it now, and I was paying, 50, 75 quid for a double pack of, I don't know, Genesis and Sontaran Experiment, or, the early Dalek two-part, two VHS sets, two different tapes. Yes, it's wild to think about it now. I think watching stuff on UK Gold as well, as and when that came up, taping some of those, and it was just trying to learn about this show that had really captivated my imagination.
Yeah.
I was reading as many books as I could find. The handbooks by House Stammers and Walker, and the
fabulous
60s, 70s, 80s, those classic books that were coming out around that time, and just trying to absorb all this information that I was really desperate to know.
I think it's brilliant because, of course, the show's off air. And you've discovered it after it's gone away, just through all these wonderful VHS releases that were coming along, etc., and then going off and looking at more and the satellite channels and all this. It's just brilliant to hear this. And is this where this comes about then?
Yeah, that's a very young me. So that is at the Llangollen exhibition.
Say it again.
Llangollen.
Woo!
So even though the show wasn't on television, there were still two really good exhibitions I could go to. One in North Wales and one as part of Longleat Safari Park. So even though, it wasn't a current BBC product, it was still very much available as a fan, and as a fan growing into the show. I've spoken to quite a few fans my age, and that 92 repeat season really rings a bell and really hooked people. And for me, then the exhibitions was the opportunity to immerse yourself and see the monsters. And Llangollen was amazing because it had the Hall of Monsters, and you could bypass it if you were too scared, or you could be brave and walk through. And I remember the Gundam robot from Warrior's Gate, and you
Yeah.
pushed a button and it swang its axe forward,
Yeah.
which I think through the research that I did for the exhibitions book, I
Yeah.
worked that mechanism must have been put in the early 80s and certainly
Yeah.
was in place by 83.
Yeah.
But even in the 90s, it was working, and it was smashing the glass. It was hitting the glass every time. So
Great.
dark, immersive environment, and this robot's trying to break its way out of the.
That was always the brilliant thing about that, because I remember that. You're right. And back in the 80s when it was in Blackpool, I remember all that. And all the kids would just desperately try to, keep pressing the button. Everybody wanted to press the button, press the button, press the button. It was amazing. It was just wonderful. The whole thing was that was brilliant. That one. It's great to think that there you are, we BEDWYR meeting Bessie, going to the exhibitions at that age, because some of us were out working and partying and all this sort of stuff, and there's you coming along, you and your age group coming along and discovering Doctor Who, and I think that's brilliant. It's wonderful. I want to talk very quickly about your collection there that's behind you. Because I do like talking to people about their collections. I mean, so what we've got there, we've got some of the action figures there, we've got some of the reference books. Obviously, I can see the Blu-rays there. We can see, I think they're DVD. But what are your favorite items of collection? Is that all you focus on, or what else do you do?
So, I mean, my collection's quite broad now. To be honest, I think it started out. This is only a fragment of my collection, really.
Yeah.
The rest of it is in a different house in a different room, which still includes the full VHS range. Because having spent, must have been over a decade, maybe 15 years, trying to collect all these, plastic tapes with magnetic reel in them. It seems madness now. I don't want to ever get rid of them because they mean so much to me. And some of the covers I've had signed and things like that. But just the tapes themselves, I've since picked up quite a few original costumes.
Oh.
So two of one the first purchase I ever made at an auction at Bonham's Auction House was the big 2010 post Blackpool closing auction. That was the first time I'd heard of one, and I went along,
Yeah.
scraped together money, and I bought Freema Agyeman's costume from Last of the Time Lords,
Okay.
which is basically just a purple vest, some cargo pants, and a quite nice leather jacket. But it became an action figure and everything, so it was kind of cool. And then a couple of months or years later, they did another sale, and I bought Freema's maid costume from Human Nature and the Family of Blood.
Right.
So it's the full costume, shoes, hat, gloves, handbag, overcoat, all of that
Wow.
stuff. And
Wow.
so that's really cool. And yeah, it's funny, I love the
Merchandise.
merchandise, and like I when I was coming into it, it was Dapple. It was Dapple figures, and now the character option stuff is amazing because it's slightly bigger, more detailed, and so many variants. You can't possibly find them all. And I just like that Doctor Who just produces all this stuff. I think it's amazing, and those peak years of 2008 where you go into Toys R Us and it was a massive display of
Mm,
stuff, or
mm.
Woolworths had exclusives, and obviously things have changed now, and it's more of a collector's market, and it's more about having those variants for collectors to get hold of. But will happily buy a million Dalek figures because I love Daleks and I love all the different colors they come in, and I don't think that'll ever stop. It's nice that I've been able to progress from that onto original costume pieces, and I've got a really good broad collection of Torchwood stuff, Sarah Jane Adventures costumes, including a couple of things that Liz Sladen wore, which are really, precious to me.
Mm.
Just knowing that, she wore those outfits. And probably the most notable purchase was when I accidentally bought a Dalek.
Yeah, I want to ask you about this. How can you accidentally buy a Dalek? You said, "Oh, I accidentally bought a Dalek." I mean, what? How did you manage that?
So, I mean, obviously, I get, I'm on mailing lists for Bonhams and whatever, and I keep an eye on the auctions and whatever. And I saw that this Dalek was coming up for sale, and I recognised it because it was an old exhibition replica and had been used in the 2013 Bullet Time trailer.
Yeah.
So I recognised it, and it's one of those things you're sort of following it at home on the laptop, and you put a bid in thinking, oh, I kind of just want to, I want to say that I bid on one. A few years before, I missed out on buying a different exhibition Dalek because it went,
Oh.
because I remember the auctioneer was at 2 and someone came in and took it out of my price range. So to just bid on a Dalek, I thought, I'll put a bid. That I've got that amount of money. I can do that.
Yeah.
And amazingly, no one else bid after me. So
Ah.
so I then had to go into work the following day and say, "Can I have next Thursday off because I need to drive to London? I need to pick up a Dalek." And it was the funniest request they'd ever had for annual leave, and of course I got it. And yeah, it's not in this room because
Where'd you keep it? Wait, where is it? Where are you?
So it's in the other Doctor Who room.
Oh, in the other Doctor Who room. Is that where you keep all the costumes as well? Do you have them down display and all this sort of stuff?
No, I'd love
No.
to. I occasionally toy with the idea of trying to put on displays, and I have done displays of stuff. There've been the odd convention and things like that where I've
All right.
taken stuff along to. There was a reunion for the Sarah Jane Adventures. There was an event held in Cardiff,
Right.
at Cardiff Student Union actually, and I had on display probably the largest collection of Sarah Jane Adventures costumes that had been on display. And it was amazing because you had Tommy Knight and basically all three kids, Sinead Michael, coming along and realizing, oh my god, I was that small when I did this show. Because I had their original costumes, and like, yeah, that's seeing their faces light up was amazing. Just seeing their reaction to, oh god, I remember wearing that.
Oh.
And yeah, so stuff like that was really cool. And yeah, I'd like to do more of it, but most of it is in storage at the moment because it's just way too much stuff.
Wow. So if anybody wants anything like that, you're the man because you've got it all.
Yeah.
So how did you get into you mentioned the book. This is your book.
Yes.
Doctor Who Exhibitions, the unofficial and unauthorized history. How did you get into writing, but also into wanting to write about the Doctor Who exhibitions? Where did that come about?
So the idea initially started when I worked at the Doctor Who Experience in Cardiff.
Right.
And we had a load of blank walls. That's it. Horrible building. Probably one of the worst buildings for having an exhibition of really fragile stuff. But there we go.
It was purpose built there, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it had no climate control or anything. So in the summer it was absolutely boiling, and in the winter they had to go out and buy hats and gloves and body warmers to give to the staff because we were all freezing to death.
It was freezing. Goodness me.
Yeah, so I was predominantly working in the shop because I understood the merchandise and I knew the ranges, and one of my big achievements for me was to get the whole DVD range available.
Yeah.
Because when we started, it was just the odd title or whatever. I'm like, no, we want to be the place that people come to fill the gaps in their collection. Because I understood that when I went to Longleat and Llangollen exhibitions, I knew where the gaps in my VHS collection were. And while I was there, I was going to find, I remember buying Warriors of the Deep in Longleat, because that was a tape that I didn't have, and I wanted a new generation who had similar gaps in their DVD range now to come to the experience and buy those stories that fitted the gaps in their collections. And we had just blank walls, and I thought it'd be really cool if we could have like a mural or some sort of info text just explaining exhibitions. And excuse me. And it kind of started from there. So when I left the experience, the idea stuck with me.
Right.
And I knew Telos Publishing would be the perfect people to pitch this to. David J. Howe, Stephen James Walker, just two really knowledgeable guys about not only Doctor Who, but publishing. If there'd been something like this before, they would have known about it. And they were like, no one's done it.
No, there'd never been anything like that. Yeah.
Please go and write it. And I feel, it's kind of stimulated an interest in exhibitions. There have now been articles in Doctor Who magazine. Keith Barnfather's done his Doctor on Display range of documentaries, which is brilliant. And it's been lovely.
You're in them?
Yeah, it's been lovely to have been interviewed for those. We still need to arrange to do a couple more.
You're going to carry on doing a couple more, are you? How exciting!
Yeah, I think there's going to be an additional title that tidies up all the other smaller exhibitions. From the first one in at the Science Museum,
yes,
and just cover up all the shorter lived ones, shall we say?
Yeah, like the up close and all that. And is that sorry to interrupt you, but is that your Dalek there?
Yep, that's the Dalek. Yeah,
there he is,
looking good.
It does look good, doesn't it? It looks very, very good. I like that one. It's nice.
It's a fantastic replica, and through research in the book, I contacted John and Gav from Dalek 6388.
Right?
They know their Daleks.
Absolutely.
And I said, and I messaged them saying, "Oh, this Dalek that's up for auction. How good is it?" And they were quite, it's a Mark Barton Hill who used to work at Longleat and knew, how to get the dimensions right, how to get the finish right. And, one of the things they pointed out was, so it's specifically a replica of one of the Daleks from Planet of the Daleks.
Yeah.
Which had been previously the gold Dalek in Day of the Daleks.
Right.
So even on mine, where the paint flickers off, you've got gold underneath it.
No.
So that's the level of detail that's gone into it, is that the paint, even though it's, the gunmetal grey and black, which is personally my favourite Dalek because it's that Genesis, era, and I just think it works brilliantly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so even that final coat of paint has gone over gold paint as it had done on the original prop at that point. So
wow.
Yeah, it's a really lovely piece, and I'm glad I have it, basically.
Yeah. It's as I say, it looks lovely. I really like it. I love the colouring on it. I think the colouring works well, but it's nice to have that little bit of history to it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and to know that it was part of the 2013 celebration. It was used for the filming of that trailer, which was just a really epic thing. Funny enough, I asked Andrew Beach recently, who'd been involved in curating that trailer shoot.
Yeah.
And the unit soldier and everything was all CGI, but the Dalek was real. So I'm like, oh, there we go. Well,
and you've got it. That's great.
I'll look after it now.
So back to this. You've approached Telos. They've told you, right, nothing, and absolutely nothing like this has ever been written before. We've had things in monthly, maybe touching on stuff, but nothing in depth about it. So where did you go from then when you started writing this? Where did you start?
I think I wrote a lot of the sort of Doctor Who experience stuff first because it was fresh.
Yeah, because it's your experience, really, isn't it? And your knowledge in there. Yeah, that does come through, by the way, in the writing. You can tell you were there.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to keep some stuff back, which might have got me in trouble, but
oh, hello. We'll come to that in a minute then.
Yeah, so I remember, having walked around, 4 or 5 days a week, I knew what items we had and where everything was and all that sort of stuff. So I think I got that down pretty quickly.
Right.
I was very keen to try and go from sort of original sources. So as you mentioned, Doctor Who magazine articles where they've gone around the exhibitions and all that sort of thing. The problem was the more people you talk to, one, you don't want to rely too much on their memory, because as was the case with these exhibitions, things moved around a lot, and even in the same year, stuff would move. So, as someone who hadn't been to like the original Blackpool exhibition, I really wanted to try and describe that journey through it, and not just it become a list of things that you saw in the exhibition in that particular year, but I wanted it to try and help the reader picture it, because that's what I wanted, because I hadn't been there and I wanted to try and to get that feel of it. And I spoke to a lot of great people who remembered it and had fond memories of particular items and things like that. And you trawl through as many sort of photo databases and newspaper archives and all that sort of stuff, try and find this stuff. Getting a hold of really random fanzines from the 80s and stuff like that, just anything that had an account of what was in a particular exhibition at any certain point, and trying to tell that story. And hopefully as you read it, you can follow particular items. Like the K1 robot's a great example of how many exhibitions that's gone to and been through over the years. So trying to tell those stories, and then the personal stuff of people who worked, Christopher Daniels, who worked at the second Blackpool. He told some great stories about David Boyle. I was lucky enough to speak to David Boyle as well before he passed. What a guy he was. The stories that he told me about just trying to keep his business going after an arson attack at his factory and whatever. Just extraordinary stuff, and such a lovely man to talk to.
Yeah, it was actually. I bumped into him once at the second Blackpool exhibition, and I don't know if I've ever told you, but I was there one day in the Blackpool museum, and I'm looking around, and there was, how they had these bits of card out with descriptions of whatever it was. Yeah. And I expressed to this person next to me, I said, well, that's not right. They've got the dates wrong there, and it's not even from the right story. And this gentleman says, oh, really? And I said, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And he said, well, we'll have to get that changed then. Turned out it was David that I was speaking to there. I had no idea. But he was like, he offered me a job because we just chat. He was lovely. He was a really nice man. And he kept that going. And, that you cover both the Blackpool exhibition, but actually it's a lot more than that, this, because it is called Doctor Who Exhibitions. You cover everything. I mean, how long did it take you to write this?
I think I spent about a year, maybe a year and a half on it.
Wow.
To be honest. Okay. Yeah, so it was quite a lot. And even after we published, so the first edition came out in 2020. Which was amazing because there was, a global pandemic on at the time, so I was astonished. But people were able to get copies. It was great. It was one of, a chart topper in some of the Amazon categories, which blew my mind. It was amazing. But even
that must have been a real thrill for you.
Oh yeah, I think my book was above, Ant and Dec, and in like TV charts, and I was like, wow.
Good.
But it proved that there was an interest in this stuff, and as soon as I'd finished it, you wait a couple of months and then you find out something else, and oh, I wish I'd put that in. Oh, I could have added that. Oh, well, and for the 60th anniversary year, we did an update and brought in the new Worlds of Wonder exhibitions in Liverpool and
Edinburgh.
So,
and that's the cover we've just shown. I'll show you there again, with the 2023 edition strapline there as well. And if you are interested in this, it is available now from telos.co.uk. You can order it right now, and it'll come through for you. And it's a cracking read. I'm not just saying that because he's on the show. I got it in 2020. I've enjoyed every minute of it, and it does actually bring back some of the memories as well. But it's a fact it did actually fill a gap, because I was only saying a few years back, I've got nothing that catalogues the exhibitions, and then suddenly it appears. So great time. And in 2020 as well. I mean, I got this in 2020 and read it in the lockdown. One of the things I was doing,
I'm sure you weren't the only one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I it's funny because Doctor Who has been written ad nauseum. There's so much material out there. There's so many wonderful books and detailed books and fascinating books about Doctor Who. I thought surely someone must have done this. Surely someone's thought of this before. But miraculously, no, nobody had. And I'm really proud of it. I think it's as much a tribute to the people that worked on the exhibitions as it is hopefully a record of what was where, when, and that sort of stuff. And it goes from that original Science Museum, Hartnell appearing in costume and all that sort of stuff, right through to where Worlds of Wonder is in Edinburgh. So it covers as much as I could possibly find on it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so much to talk about when it comes to the exhibitions, and it's amazing that you found enough space in the book to put everything in, especially with your knowledge of the Doctor Who experience. Also, you're obviously very involved and aware with Neil Cole's museum over in Allendale, which we visited just a wee while back then, did a little short piece on it, and that was wonderful. And I noticed your name on certain things in there as well. I was like, oh, there's BEDWYR. There's BEDWYR. It's got a monster after him.
I'm blown away by what Neil has done up in Allendale. I think it's incredible. From having this, leaky cellar and turning it into something so special and astonishing. I will talk him up to anyone and everyone. He dedicated one of the cheetah people, I think.
We saw that one.
But I donated an Outliers knife from Full Circle that I had in my collection. So that's on display there, which is great. I've got a couple of other items that hopefully at some point I'll be able to,
fantastic,
take up and donate. But it was a period in the book where you had the closure of the Doctor Who experience and this void, and it felt at that time anyway that it was going to be private, personal collections run by fans. Bromyard is another one, and Neil has just done incredibly. And funny enough, the first time I visited it actually is caught on one of Keith's documentaries. And going around, I could picture it being the lineup at Momi or something like that, and having that feel of Llangollen and what I imagine Blackpool 1 to have been like, very, very well lit and dark and immersive, which was something like, the modern exhibitions don't really have.
No. I mean, it's very hard to say to anybody who never went to the original Blackpool exhibition how special it was, because it was in a cellar and you had to go down steps to get in there, and then it was huge, and then you had to go up steps to get out again. You were taken into the Doctor's world at the time, and it is very difficult. But out of all the exhibitions that you cover in your book, and certainly I've been to a lot of them in my time as well. You mentioned Mommy there, the Museum of the Moving Image. That was down in London. That was a completely different beast. The experience itself that you worked at, completely different beast. And I think for a certain generation like myself, nothing's going to touch the original Blackpool exhibition. But I was so impressed with how Neil's just nearly got it. You know, I mean, if it was a bigger space, he would nail it. You see, but the lighting is good there. The sound effects are great. The atmosphere in that, it's very special.
He
Because
gets the
it's
atmosphere.
the closest it's ever been. Yeah, it's the closest I've ever been to revisiting the original Blackpool Museum from all those years ago. And certainly in your book, it really does come across. The work is there, and you know, I think you've done really well on that, because you read that section, if you like, and you just think, oh, happy days.
Yeah.
It really was.
That's the goal of it. If you know, hopefully, if you went to any of these exhibitions, it brings back those memories.
Oh yeah.
If you hadn't, like me, you know, hadn't been to Blackpool 1, for instance, you get a feeling of what it was like, and
Yeah.
an appreciation for how special these
Uh,
exhibitions were.
I mean, this is again with this book and doing this book. I mean, you've been able to actually talk about this book at various places as well, because you have done certain conventions. Well, the first time I met you properly, of course, was at Blackpool in 2023. Back in April, there you are, there on the left-hand side with Neil and David, myself, and Erica, who we were hosting Invasion Blackpool 2023, a convention that was put together to celebrate the 60th anniversary. And that was a great panel as well, because what we were talking about there in Blackpool were the exhibitions, both Blackpool exhibitions. And then, of course, we talked about Neil's, and you came in and talked about some of the others, and we got to talk about your book as well. But it just seemed right, you know, that there we were in Blackpool talking about this, the history of the exhibitions, which for a whole generation, or a couple of generations, really, it's always going to be Blackpool, really, because you had two of them there. You know, over different times. It was just, I loved that panel. I really enjoyed that panel. It was so nice to talk about these, and the audience got it as well, didn't they? The audience were like, "Oh yeah, I went there. Oh yeah, I was at that one," and it was wonderful.
I mean, I was very grateful to be invited, but I knew going out, the audience would know. They would either have been to original Blackpool that ended in the mid 80s, or they would have been to the more recent one. And you know, it's really easy to be enthusiastic when you know the audience is sitting there and thinking, "Oh yeah, I remember that. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, that was great."
yeah.
And I visited Second Blackpool and I loved it, and you know, it was at the time probably the biggest collection, because it
Oh
was a
yes,
combination of
yeah.
Llangollen and Longleat, which had closed in 03.
Mm.
Plus, you had some modern stuff, so it was easily the biggest collection at the time, and that was special in and of itself. I think it's something that you can kind of see on the cover of the book, that you know some of the Dalek hemispheres are a bit damaged and all that sort of
Oh
thing.
yeah, yeah.
But that's what it was like. You know, some of these things were falling apart, and I think it's amazing, particularly the work that Neil has done in restoring some pieces to their former glory. Is just, I mean, it's a skill set that I
It's
can't even
amazing, isn't it?
comprehend. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the red pteroleptal, a
Oh yeah.
Mestor. I mean, if you watch our visitations show where Brendan and I go along there, and we're looking at, I mean, I was stunned. I mean, that is really clever. It's a talent, because you can't
Absolutely.
see any of his restoration at all. You know, it's just absolutely with so much care and love and devotion and study, because you have to go back and look at the photographs and look at the DVD, and you have to do this. And how did that fit now? What color? It's just brilliant, and it's just a shame, really, isn't it, that, you know, various incarnations, to use our parlance, of the BBC never bothered to look after them properly, and then sold them off left, right, and centre. You know, it's just, I will always equate, though, you know, well, Blackpool for me is always going to be Doctor Who until my dying day. You know, even though there's nothing there now, but it's always going to be. I think it's such a shame, isn't it? It's a sign of the times, I guess, but. I think, you know, what a shame that there's nothing actually there for the tourists that go there now to promote Doctor Who, and they seem to be doing all these traveling things and what have you. Now, it's not the same, really. Okay, you get to go to different cities and different people maybe to see it, but it's not really the same for me. I want to talk about Well, leading to this, how did you get into writing?
Oh, I always enjoyed writing. I don't know where that came from. I mean, I can imagine my grandmother was an English teacher.
Right.
So she was very encouraging in terms of reading, and still encourages me. Have you written a script? Make sure go and write a script, or
Oh, bless.
and all that sort of thing. And I mean, I think it was 2019. I had a short story published by Candy Jar Books.
Aha, he says.
Ah, there we go. So yeah, one of only their second short story collections, and I wrote this story about the Brigadier being, in his nursing home, care home, and I tried to tie it in with that scene where Matt Smith phones and
Oh,
the nurse
yes.
in the white uniform and whatever answers and says,
He's
sorry, he's
passed.
passed.
Yeah.
And I tried to, include that description of that character, try and place it. And for me, it's the Brigadier's last adventure, last saving, saving the universe and saving, saving the residents of the care home from, this demon who's sucking the life of all these people because they're old and vulnerable. And I was really proud of that, and I'd love to write more fiction. But once I had this idea for the exhibitions book, I was very much right. Let's do
Mhm.
this. Let's do this well. Let's do it
Mm.
justice. So, yeah, I've always been comfortable in writing. I write any sort of story ideas that occur to me. I write them down and try and expand them and try and. My problem is I probably have too many ideas and I can't just sit still and follow one thing through from beginning to end. But I have the idea, which is half the battle normally. So,
Well, absolutely, getting the idea.
mm.
If you don't get the idea, you can't write the book. So, are you gonna look at doing? Are you playing around with the idea of developing some of these ideas and getting some more stories out there and doing some books?
I'd love to write more fiction. Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Um, I also have in the back of my mind, we could do a really detailed Doctor Who experience book and tell those stories, because I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah, because it's not going to come back now, so you're not going to break any sort of
I'm pretty
secret.
sure my non-disclosure has expired after 5 years, so I think
Yeah,
I'm good to go.
when did it close? Remind me when it closed. It was quite a while ago now, wasn't it?
It closed in 2017,
Yes.
so it was we opened in 2012, and the building was there for 5 years. I lasted just over 2 and a bit years.
Right. Okay. You've actually given us some pictures of your time in there as well. So, um, they are very. And thanks for sending these in. I mean, you mentioned earlier that you were there for for all that time, but you got up to some really good stuff. I mean, I like some of these pictures. He said, "Look, so this is a Jadoon."
Yeah, so that's actually the convention, which was in the Wales Millennium Centre. So it was a little walk away
It's a
from,
walk up the road. Yeah.
yeah, where the actual experience was taking place. But I remember them handing leaflets out for that at the time,
Ah.
thinking, "Oh, that'd be really cool." Or I wonder if I could get work there.
So is this
And
before it opened then?
yeah, so this was a couple of months before it opened. So
Brilliant.
they had the leaflets and were promoting it and whatever. And then we opened a couple of months after that convention.
Amazing. That's really amazing. And you've got a couple of things here as well. That's you on the left there setting up. I do actually remember the Weeping Angels display.
Yeah. So actually, so the photo on the right is from when I worked in BBC Wales
Ah,
in
I see.
2008, and we did Children in Need studio tours,
All right.
which was an incredible weekend. I think we were there from the Thursday to the Monday. and it was just so much fun. It was just, it was just a great opportunity to take people around the sets, which were at the Upper Boat Studios. And then I think again that had sort of prepared me a little bit for the experience,
Of course,
and
yeah.
and proving that I could, talk to people about Doctor Who in that kind of environment. I mean, I wasn't working on Doctor Who at the time. I was, working um, as well. I think my job title was a media manager. I was basically tidying up all the images that the website teams had for BBC Wales, because they were all a mess and they were all over the place. And I saw that they were looking for people to help out with these tours, and I volunteered and said, yes, I can do that.
Oh,
And even when I left after that sort of contract, that project had run out, it very neatly set me up for a couple of years later when the experience was looking for staff, and I said, yes, I can, I can do that. And um, the photo of the Weeping Angels is really funny. So there was a sort of immersive theatre show.
yes.
Was it Crash of the Byzantium or something like
It
that?
was Crash of the Byzantium. I went to it in Salford Keys,
Oh, there we go.
Salford in Manchester. Yeah, it was. It was like they tried it again fairly recently down in London, and I don't think it was as successful. But you were greeted by actors playing unit soldiers, and you had to run through their script. You had to run through a story, and it
Right.
took you to various elements of, I would know them as scenes.
Yeah.
And all the kids had to do things like push buttons or do this or it was very interactive. That's the buzzword now, isn't it?
Yeah.
At one point, all these sort of alarms, sirens, and what I thought were machine gun bullets went off, and you had to duck down behind everything. It was one of those sort of. It was it was very good actually. It was like being inside a
Yeah.
production. Yeah.
I mean, the whole idea behind the experience was that BBC Worldwide at the time had done some research and found that people wanted interactivity and they wanted the opportunity to fly the TARDIS, and that's why you had, you know, the Matt
Lovely.
Smith console room that could never be replaced because it cost too much money and
I wonder where
worked
it is now.
most of the time, with all the hydraulics and moving floor
Yeah,
and
it
whatever.
moved, didn't it? It was,
Yeah.
and it shook a bit. And how? Oh, it was that was brilliant. That was so clever.
Yeah, so it was very big on the interactivity thing.
Hmm.
And looking back at the exhibitions, as we've mentioned, there was an element of interactivity even in the 70s, 80s.
Oh yeah.
But to go back to the Weeping Angels, so after that production had finished,
Yeah.
they basically just dumped all the Weeping Angels on us.
They did not.
They absolutely did. And I'm talking bits of Weeping Angel.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone who went round the experience, I don't want to burst any bubbles, but there was only actually ever two Weeping Angels originally in that forest.
What?
There was genuinely only two Weeping Angels. There were a couple of stone props from the Sarah Jane story with the
Oh,
Gorgon.
the Gorgon. Yeah.
So Maria's dad, stoned Maria's dad. He was in one corner, but like that's not a Weeping Angel. So basically, I thought, well, we've got these Weeping Angels. Let's try and get them into the environment.
Fantastic.
So I got out a drill and was drilling, arms back onto torsos and all that sort of thing. But in that picture, you can see one which was just mounted onto a bit of wood.
Yeah.
And I thought, right, well, I'll just bury it in the earth, and you can it was just to add more angels to the forest, and the experience was just an amazing job, probably the best job I've ever had because it was just so much fun. I got to be inside a Dalek,
Yeah.
one of the proper Dalek props that they were using to film the show. We had it, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. Check the lid on. Brilliant. I'll go around. And I just worked with just amazing people who were just as enthusiastic about
Oh,
the
great. So
show.
everybody was a fan then.
Yeah, pretty much.
Great.
Everyone was into it, and everyone bought into it. It was I was probably more difficult to those in charge because I was constantly pitching stuff. I was constantly saying, "Oh, why don't we do this? Let's do this? Oh, what if we rearrange? Stuff like
Ah,
that."
what a shame.
Because
Yeah.
my imagination was firing, and just being in that environment all the time, I could see how we could
How things could be. Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
It was basic stuff like, oh, hang on, I've got Freema's May costume. Can we put that on a mannequin and put it next to the scarecrow that we've got?
That makes sense. Yeah.
And you've got like a human nature family of blood thing, and it was things like that. I remember we had we had, there was a lot of disagreement. So Kate and Mara had sadly passed,
Yeah.
and I knew that we had a costume in the back, and I put it out on display on the TARDIS console room set.
Is that the time in the Rani one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So she'd been on that set and everything, So it tied
Yeah.
in really nicely. We did a nice little frame, in tribute to
Oh,
Kate and
lovely.
Mara.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, we can't tell anyone. We can't put that on social media or anything because it'll look like we're marketing ourselves based on this actress dying and stuff like that. And
Oh,
and these were all debates that were happening between Cardiff and London as well. So it became I shared a picture and I just messaged all my mates, just, can you share this picture? Because we're just trying to have a
pay
nice little
respect.
tribute to an
Yeah.
actor who was so highly regarded, not just for what she did, in two roles, stories of Doctor Who, but
Yeah.
far wider than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was those kinds of things that you're constantly coming up against this debate, which had to go through London and all this sort of stuff. And I love the experience. I just think it could still be going now and could be raking in millions and millions and millions of pounds if done properly.
It's always going to be the bureaucracy that gets in the way, though, isn't it? Because what we're dealing with now is a corporate division that doesn't necessarily understand fandom. I mean, to be honest, they never have. They haven't. They haven't. They didn't when I was a kid. The nearest you got to them understand. I mean, the guys, Lord Martin, for example, he wasn't really when they set up Blackpool, the original Blackpool exhibition, they got it right because they were theatrical as well. They were imaginative. They were creative. They understood what it must be. They looked at the essence of the show, but they weren't corporate then. They weren't owned by a big body that said, dictates and KPIs and all this sort of stuff. And in a way, Neil's museum has also been able to show how effective it can be when you've got creativity over budget, creativity over a KPI, over a corporate outlook. That's what worries me moving forward now. If the experience was ever going to be there as well, because I remember walking around this what appeared to be a hangar. I'm going to be honest. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
it felt very
Basically what it was.
well, yeah, but it did feel hollow. And you're walking around all these sets and stuff, and it was just there, that bang, bang. There's a set with a prop on it, bang. There's another TARDIS, bang. It wasn't it wasn't what I was expecting from my experience of museums. And if people like yourself were able to actually just put that energy into it and to put that, creativity into it, there could be so much more. But I fear that it's never going to actually happen again.
I mean, we ran into loads of issues because this was pretty much the first time BBC Worldwide had run anything like this. So when it had been in Olympia in London, everyone was sort of, subcontracted, and
Oh, I see.
when it came to Cardiff, we were all employed by BBC Worldwide.
Right.
So they then had to deal with all the HR stuff and all that basic stuff.
Ooh.
But
Ooh.
yeah, didn't go brilliantly.
No.
and
Sure.
and there were people in charge who got it to a certain extent, but I don't know whether they felt limited in what they could do, and whether they whether a lot of stuff had to be run through the production office because it was still in production, and you can't do anything without going past them in case you're alluding to something that might come up in
Oh,
the
I
near
see.
future. You know, I don't know whether that was an element involved as well. But it was, yeah, I know what you mean, because it was well, for a start, it was overlit. It was spotlights on everything, and to the extent that we were
Totally. Yeah.
damaging costumes with the lighting and everything. And I
Still,
think,
in that day and night, because we spoke about this on our show, didn't we? Blackpool Days, our summer special for 2023. We talked about how the lighting then was so hot,
hmm,
and had all the gels and stuff on it. It was actually destroying all the costumes.
yeah, well, I'll give you a great example. So, David Tennant's brown suit.
Yeah, the
If you
famous one.
lifted the lapel, it was a completely different shade of brown underneath.
Oh no! So, like it being out in the sun all the time.
Yeah, it was the lights were fade, and where LED lights and whatever, they're not, light bulbs are generating heat, but they're still really powerful lights, and it needed to be lower down, and and all that sort of stuff. And
I
I
can't believe
mentioned
they did
that
that.
the sort of temperature control was a nightmare for some of the latex stuff, and it just,
And you're
I
leaving it there
think,
overnight as well. Every 7 days a week, every week,
yeah.
365 days. I mean, goodness me,
So things would warm up and then it would cool down
cool
overnight.
down.
We had birds. Birds would settle on the top of the roof and peck holes in the ceiling. So
Hey,
we'd get drips, because it was just thick, fabric, PVC,
look at it.
heavy duty fat. So birds were pecking holes in the roof, and so we'd
I didn't
have,
know that.
so we had water buckets, for drips when it
Oh,
started to rain, and you know it was it 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 could have been better looked after, shall we say.
mm,
And a
mm.
lot of it was the design of the building, which was a useful building, and the idea of it being something you could almost take down and rebuild somewhere else, and that sort of stuff. But I think it was a useful technical exercise. um
Well, yeah, I mean, ABBA have done it recently, haven't you? Haven't they, with their theatre in London, which is designed purposely to be taken down and put up somewhere else, and it's all this, environmentally friendly, sustainable, all the keywords that you use there. So,
mm.
in a sense, that idea was ahead of its time, but just not possibly executed correctly.
It just wasn't suitable for what they were putting on, which was fragile costumes from 70s, 80s that couldn't cope with being illuminated with a spotlight for a start, then heated and cooled every 24 hours. It was, I
Were you
think
guys running around every day looking at these things, making sure that they were okay?
we're trying to as much as we could. I mean, I remember that first summer we had a particularly hot summer,
All right.
and the original Zygon shrank
Yeah, yeah,
and had to
yeah.
come off. The the mask on the 80s Sontaran had to come off, had to have his helmet on or be taken off entirely, because that mask deteriorated, and we were just accelerating that deterioration. And
Yes, yeah,
Mike Tucker had done some incredible things in terms of getting Broton out in the first place in 2010 when it first opened, and
yeah.
there's a reason why Broton is currently in Neil's
Yeah, I met
exhibition,
him.
because because that's temperature controlled, that's lit properly, it's being looked after as it should be.
Yeah,
So it shouldn't have any more damage added to it than it should,
I hope
um,
not. Yeah.
despite being from mid 70s.
Yeah, yeah. It
So
was wonderful to see that as well, because I had seen it. I'm sure it must have been the experience. And I'd taken a couple of photographs of it and wasn't that impressed, to the point where I'm saying to my mate, it can't be the actual one. It doesn't look like I remember it from the show, from the Terror of the Night. It can't be. And yet when I see him again over in Allendale with Neil, because it's lit properly and it's looked at, oh my God, this is it. This is the one. Look at it. All the details are still there. And those eyes, the
yeah,
eyes were
yeah,
spooky in there, because I don't want to talk about it. It was really scary. It's brilliant to
yeah.
see him. Brilliant to see
It's
him.
it's a great piece, that, and the fact that the stomach and the head is largely fiberglass, and it's the bits around it that have been repaired and are less original, and the feet are just Marks and Spencer slippers and stuff like that. I remember.
Oh, don't tell me that. That doesn't seem right for a Zygon.
Yeah, well, at least poor Ashton was comfortable in it. But I remember, speaking to Mike Tucker about his restoring of a few bits, and I remember that one.
That's brilliant.
And yeah, it's, I don't know, these things really benefit from good context, and I think the way we talk about the Weeping Angels being so effective that you didn't realize there was only 2 of them in there.
No.
That should have been extended out onto the exhibition floor, really.
Yeah, because that was quite a good set, and it was a proper set. It was what I was expecting, because it was in a graveyard. It was quite dark. It was spooky. The sound effects were in there. A lot of the kids were absolutely terrified. Brilliant.
Oh,
That's how it should have been.
I think one trip through was about 25 minutes. So every 25 minutes or so throughout the day, you'd hear on the radio in your ear, "Can someone come and collect this screaming child from the Weeping Angel Forest?" I remember one of my colleagues was trying to help a kid out, and the kid projectile vomited on him.
Oh, God.
That's what you can do when you're properly immersive and you really pay attention to the atmosphere of what you're presenting. It's very easy.
That's what it should be like.
Yeah, it should be. And they tried when they redid it, 2015, etc. They tried to make it a bit more immersive and have stuff on an appropriate background. So I think the sort of Dalek invasion of Earth, the
yes,
prop,
and the sign. It's illegal to throw bodies in the water and all that. Yeah. I see what you're saying.
They tried to recreate more stuff like that, but it was still overlit.
Yeah.
So you lost so you didn't get the atmosphere and things like that. And I would have, when I was pitching stuff, I said, why not do episode specific kind of dioramas and displays? Because we were doing it when we had new stuff come in. So Day of the Doctor, the 50th anniversary was great, and we had the 3 TARDIS exterior props lined up, and stuff like that. I remember putting John Hurt's War Doctor costume into a chair, because we had the chair, and it was weird because it was just a chair, but actually putting the costume in it
made sense.
It reminds you of that scene. And doing little things like that really, for me, elevated it.
Yeah,
because otherwise it was just static costumes in a line, and that's interesting, and you take a picture and you move on to the next one. But
yeah,
if you've got, because a lot of our companion costumes were from Journey's End, I think. So if we had that group together with Davros and the Supreme Dalek or whatever, it would just not just bring you into the world of Doctor Who, it would bring you back to watching that specific story.
Into the story. Yeah. And it makes perfect sense.
And again, that's what the original exhibitions were like.
Yeah.
They were, okay, you had some random monsters collated at the end of the Blackpool and stuff like that. But when new stuff went in, they tried to dress it using the same set, and things like Robots of Death. You had the sand miner and the Laserson probe, prop, and Taran Capel behind it, and you actually got a sense of the episode.
You did,
not just static. Oh look, there's a Dalek, there's a Cyberman, there's a Siler, and move on. And And I think that's the stuff that I connected with, and I think that's what the kind of things that I was pitching, and they used an element of it, and I think it's not easy for Neil, for instance, to do stuff like that.
No, because
a lot of what he's got is very. I have one thing from this story.
Yes, yeah.
But we were blessed with having, a variety of things from the same story.
Absolutely.
And so you could have done more with it. And I remember Longleat had a really effective Hemovores in the Graveyard scene. And it was just, as you say, Lord Martin and Martin Wilkie thinking about not just putting this stuff behind glass and that's enough. It was, well, how can we make it more evocative?
How dramatic and
Yeah.
evoke. I mean, I grew up with this stuff, so I know what you're saying. I don't know why they don't look at it now. It's probably because they're unaware. They don't know the histories. They should read your book. They should go and look at the photographs, because the impact as a kid or a teenager is immense. I remember to this day the Earthshock Cybermen in the Earthshock set in the original Blackpool with the silos behind them, and how dark that was, and how they looked fantastic because they weren't lit really. They were just these the traditional and much quoted saying the silver giants in the dark, but they were there, and it was. And I spent hours looking at that particular set. Each time a Dalek story happened, the sets behind the revolving Daleks were changed to correspond. So eventually they ended up in a sort of warehouse environment for Resurrection of the Daleks, for example, with these brick type walls going around them. The Warriors of the Deep with the Merca and the Sea Devil. Very, very simple, but it had all these sort of green water. I mean, that a setting is part of the exhibition. It's part of how you present these beautiful props and costumes they've got.
I think I remember that for that they even went to the effort of having 2 panes of glass and having water flowing through.
There was one of them, yes.
Yeah,
very
to
clever.
give you that underwater feeling. Later on it was some green plastic, looks like seaweed hanging down.
That's right, yeah. And also, what did you call that? I could have sworn some of it was that sort of tissue paper stuff you used to get as well, which was shaped.
Yeah, probably.
But it was so inspirational because years later, for myself, I had a budget of about £10 in the 90s to do theme nights at pubs. So how did they do it in Blackpool? Oh yeah, tissue paper. Anything can be done to make things look good. I mean, you've given us this picture here of you actually putting together a display in the experience. Now, these are the photographs they gave you from the day of the Doctor, and you're very busy there. Yeah. What are you doing exactly?
So this is me and my colleague Elodie. So basically, when the notice boards that you see in the Day of the Doctor in the Black Archive, and they have all these pictures of all the companions and all that sort of stuff. When they were delivered to us, the boards were empty.
Oh God!
And all the pictures were just in a folder.
They'd taken everything off the board.
Yeah,
I'm sorry for laughing.
So we then had to go back. We had to then study all the screen grabs.
Oh no!
From the episode to try and piece together where everything went, and it took us ages.
I'm sure it did.
And ultimately, we managed to get a good representation of what the boards looked like, and I think they were as accurate as we. I think they had a couple of set photos that they sent us as well to help, but yeah, it was just that whole process of, okay, here you go, here's the bits, and here's the other bits, and it's like, what? How are we supposed? Okay. I remember there was the Gallifrey. It was like this big sort of oval shaped desk that all the Time Lords were around, and it was heavily assisted with CGI and whatever. But when it was delivered to us, it was just the prop table, and they gave us some cutouts that had obviously been used as standby stuff for on the table for whatever. But
like a bowl of fruit and stuff.
Almost. I mean, it's all this sort of Gallifreyan swirls and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But they'd obviously been kept in a ring binder because all of them had hole punches in the side. You're like, oh my God, you really want to stick these out? It's like, yeah, well, otherwise it just looks like a boring table. It's like, oh my God. But you can see what yeah, so it's funny when things like that came through. And I remember there'd been the symphonic spectaculars down in Australia, and they delivered the stuff back to us, and putting together the Ice Warrior from Cold War,
All right.
and the Wooden Cybermen, and not only trying to get this stuff on a mannequin, which doesn't really bend too much because it's not a human being,
Yeah.
but also that it was like the most elaborate jigsaw I've ever done. It's like, right, well, what, you pick up this bit, right? Where does that go? Is that a thigh plate? Is that a car?
They didn't label it.
No.
I'm sorry for laughing because it must have been torturous for you, but it's common sense.
Well, no, but that's what made it so amazing, was having the opportunity to do this sort of stuff. And
Wow.
you'd open a crate and there'd be 6 Cybermen heads, just Cybermen helmets that have been delivered back, and you're like, okay, cool. Brilliant. What am I supposed to do with those? But
and finding
it
out
was
what to
amazing.
do with them.
And
That's it. Amazing.
yeah, and yeah, the Ice Warrior in particular was another one where it was kind of chained up to the torpedo tubes and all that sort of stuff, and that looked really effective because I remember tweaking the lighting as well, trying to not be so obvious on it,
Yeah,
so it looked a bit more in the darkness, which I think helped it.
It is difficult when you're working with such restraints, though. I mean, because it was a big hangar environment, that, and on a mezzanine level as well, and it must have been a nightmare to try and do that. When you mentioned the lighting, it was really, I mean, I don't remember any sort of color in there at all, any atmosphere from it. I do remember a lot of white
spotlights.
Yeah. I do remember that. It was quite glaring, wasn't it? And sometimes it shouldn't have been, to hide things like hole punches in pieces of paper. I mean, you got to do an awful lot in the experience as well. I mean, you got to meet hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and you mentioned that you were in the shop, and you got to serve a lot of customers, didn't you? I mean, everybody popped through that way, didn't they?
I'd forgotten that one. Yeah.
I mean, there's a very happy shopper there.
Yeah, no, he's only buying the Silence merch, but there we go.
Biased. And also, of course, during your time there as well, this happened. You got to be in the 5-ish Doctors reboot. Yeah. And we covered this in our review of the 5-ish Doctors reboot. But I mean, that must have been a bit of a thrill for you, because you're in it twice, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. So
the history
there was a longer shot of us walking into the experience before the Doctors followed.
Yeah.
And then we went round to the right to look at Bessie, and then we're on the exhibition floor as well. And I remember thinking, filming it at the time, if I'm here, surely I'm going to recognize those 3 guys walking through.
You were doing method.
Yeah, I mean, the screen grab you've flashed up makes it look like I'm looking down the lens, and I'm not. I'm actually following because I've recognized the 3 people that have walked past me. At least that's in my head.
In your head, yeah. I'm surprised that Mr. Director didn't say to you, "Oi, can you just cut out the acting bit there? You just walk." You're being too serious.
Overthinking it, obviously.
Yeah, overthinking it. Oh, wow. Well, it's really good to chat with you, and to get your recollections, and to tell us all about your fabulous book, Doctor Who Exhibitions. There we go. The unofficial and authorized edition, the 2023 edition, as we say, is out now. I hope you haven't found the show too pointless.
Hey!
What was that about?
Yeah.
There you are, on Pointless at the BBC. Did you win anything? Did they give out prizes on that? I don't know it.
I got a Pointless trophy.
Did you get a toaster? A cuddly toy?
No,
not worth going on
anymore.
Then. Is that why they call it Pointless?
Yeah. Sadly, didn't make any money out of it, and
there's money involved. Oh,
yeah. I had a pointless answer, and it wasn't one of the 3 I selected to go with. And Rivaldo, 2002 Football World Cup, that would have won me nearly $3,000. But
wow, okay. When did you do that then? When was this?
Oh God, when was that? Must have been March, April 2021. We filmed that, and it was shown in late October.
Was it?
Yeah.
And was that when you were working within the BBC as well? Because
No,
before we go, we mentioned that you have actually done some work on Doctor Who, haven't you? What tell us about what you did there?
So, well, I had a friend who was working on another BBC series, Atlantis, and
Yeah.
he said, "I don't suppose you're free." And actually, I was meant to work in the experience, and I basically told him I wasn't coming in and got into trouble for it. Um, but having done that day as a runner on Atlantis,
Yeah.
my name then gets spread amongst all the second ADs who are looking for daily runners and whatever. And I worked on the odd day on a couple of Peter Capaldi episodes. So it was a Death in Heaven and Dark Water.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a runner for sequences when we were filming Cybermen coming out of various graves.
Oh
So
yes, right.
on
Okay.
sort of coming through like a grass surface, coming through stones, all that stuff. Looked absolutely amazing.
Right.
Um, I remember doing that. I did a day on Thin Ice with
Yep.
Capaldi and Pearl Mackie. Um, Last Christmas I did a day on that, and the Return of Doctor Mysterio, that Christmas special as
Oh
well.
yeah. Yeah.
So just the odd day here and there, as a runner, assistant director, just working with a cast and um, yeah, just doing that job. And my friend who I mentioned, who had been working on Atlantis, he's gone on to do amazing stuff and worked on you know net really big Netflix shows, some movies.
Good for him.
For me, I'd worked on Doctor Who, and that was me done.
That was it. I've retired now, love. I've done my bit.
Yeah,
I was in showbiz for 2 years.
for me, you couldn't top Doctor Who, so I wasn't going to try.
Oh,
I did,
bless you.
did do. I was asked to cover for a second AD on the Welsh language soap Pobl Cwm.
Oh yeah.
They'd unfortunately gone down with COVID. I don't know why they phoned me, but the challenge of being a second was, yeah, I'll give that a go for a week, 10 days. Sure, why not?
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it for the short time that I was, and that got me my first screen credit on S4C, which was nice. So I
Yeah.
actually had my name in the credits of something,
Lovely.
instead of just in one of these complete history books. But yeah, it wasn't something I wanted to do every day. I enjoy it when I'm doing it, but they're very long days. They're very tiring shoots.
Yeah.
Doctor Who especially is a really really long day and really intense kind of. If you've got effects and monsters and all that sort of stuff going on, is more than just doing um, a normal day on most television programs. So,
Mm.
uh, but yeah, I loved it. It was not what I was going to do every day, but to say that I worked on Doctor Who was all I needed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's lovely that you've got that as well, isn't it? Because it looks nice on the CV.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Worked for the BBC a couple of times. Worked, on I can list shows that I've worked. Casualty, Atlantis. Doctor Who, obviously, like uh, proper BBC One high profile kind of
Yeah, because we,
Saturday night.
we forget, BBC Wales was producing a lot of content for BBC One over, gosh,
Mhm.
more than a decade. There
Yeah,
was a hell of a lot coming out there because we had Merlin as well, didn't we? There was a lot of stuff that was really, really, really being pushed out because of the success of Doctor Who and the success that BBC Wales played in that. You
yeah,
know,
and it's great when we were talking about the Five-ish Doctors
mm,
a couple of weeks ago, and it's seeing them go around Roth Lock and those drama studios and it's like, oh yeah, I know where they are because that takes you into that studio, and oh
Yeah.
yeah, if you go around the corner, that's where I frantically try and make coffee for the director whilst keeping an eye on cast from wandering off and all that sort of, it brought back those memories, and I am proud to say that I worked in that drama studio for the odd day, a couple of weeks here and there, and yeah, Casualty is great. It's like walking into a real hospital. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And then Doctor Who, you go into a studio and it's incredible. I remember um, I don't know what they called it. They called whether it was the vault or something. It was just this round room with all these brains in jars from the Return of Doctor Mysterio.
Oh yeah.
And I remember I was helping with the art department randomly as well, and trying to fill these jars with this blue liquid, and operating the doors so the masked medics could come in, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's such a different side of it, and I love particularly the DVD range now, how they do their behind the scenes and making of documentaries and stuff like that. And it's why Confidential was such a big hit, was because Doctor Who, unlike any other show, really gets you interested in, oh, how did they do that? How
Yeah.
did they make that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it's I don't know many programs that do that.
Well, certainly not in this day and age, but that was always the ability, if you like. That's what made Doctor Who special, because you always wanted to know how it was done. And that's why so many people ended up in some sort of television, film, creative, theatre, whatever, because Doctor Who back from the 60s inspired people to go and find out, and they found out and started doing it. And it's just been amazing, isn't it? And that's
Absolutely.
what it should be. And
And
hopefully that will continue.
yeah, I think now you've got a new generation who started watching in 2005, watched Doctor Who Confidential, and realized, oh, actually, that's a
That's
career.
a job.
That's people get paid to do that,
Yeah.
and are now in the television industry and are now working their way through, um, in terms of assistant directors like I did, or costume, makeup,
Yeah.
set
Learning,
design,
making their
all
way
that
up.
sort of,
Yeah.
are taking that inspiration that they had from watching something which is so creative, because Doctor Who can be anything. I've always, it's always for me the best show in the world because it can do anything. It can be anything for anyone and for everyone. And it inspires people to, as I did, go and write their own stuff
Yeah.
or create in another way, whether it's, Neil creating an exhibition and salvaging monsters and restoring those to people, who do stunning artwork. I've got artwork, above my desk here, by Will Brooks, who did the Target covers you had on a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, he was on Merchandise Paradise telling us all about his covers for
Yeah,
the for the range. Yeah.
I've got some of his prints on the wall in front of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That creativity just is stimulated so much by Doctor Who, and more so than any other show that I can think of.
Oh, totally. And hopefully that will continue, and hopefully more and more people will find it stimulates them to want to know how to do this, or can I do this, or as we say there, that's a job, because that's the way it's always been. It's been amazing. Listen, BEDWYR, I have taken up a lot of your time, and I know you're busy, so thank you so
Oh,
much for coming and having a chit chat. Really, really, really enjoyed it. Once
absolutely.
again, just to let you know, BEDWYR's book is available. You can get it from telos.co.uk. It's available right now. The new updated 2023 edition. Looks like I am going to have to go and get another version of that on. And if you are going to do a sequel, if you like, all about the experience, good luck. And enjoy the process, and hopefully it won't take you as long as that one did, because you've got all the backstage stories, and I will get you to come talk about it as it's published. I can guarantee you that one. so
I shall
so
start
listen.
writing.
Yeah, exactly. Start writing right now. Go and have a cup of tea and do it now, and we will talk about it next year. That'll do, won't it? Again, thank you so much. Thank you for watching Chit Chat with BEDWYR. Please don't forget to like, please subscribe, please share the show, do everything that we know we have to do, and keep in touch with us here. Don't forget to ring that bell so you get notifications of when the Whotastic panel, including BEDWYR, is back to talk about goodness knows what to do with Doctor Who. So yes, thank you for joining us. We'll see you again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.